The dust tasted of iron and drought. Mai pressed her chapped lips together, squinting against the dawn light that sliced across Rattlesnake Ridge Ranch like a blade. The New Mexico sun showed no mercy, even at daybreak. She shifted the worn canvas satchel on her shoulder, its weight as familiar as her own shadow, and studied the buildings before her. The ranch house sat low against the earth, built strong and plain. Its adobe walls had faded to the color of old bone, and the wooden shutters hung crooked, as if the place had given up trying to look good. Beyond it, a windmill creaked in the dry wind, its blades turning slow circles under a sky already pale and washed out. "You the one asking after work?" The voice came from her left, deep and cautious. Mai turned to find a man stepping out from the barn's shadow. Gideon Blackwood stood tall and lean, shaped by hard years and harder weather. His face carried the permanent squint of someone who had spent a lifetime reading horizons. His hands were scarred from rope and wire, the kind that told stories without words. "I am," Mai said. Her voice was steady, with a soft accent that hinted at a life lived far from these harsh plains. "I can cook, clean, mend what needs mending. I work hard and keep to myself." Gideon's grey eyes moved over her, not with hunger, but with the calm, measuring look of a man weighing cost and worth. Her dark tunic was clean but faded, mended with careful, tiny stitches. Her hands carried the marks of work, not vanity. Whatever she was running from, and Gideon knew women, especially a Chinese woman, didn't arrive alone at remote ranches unless they were running from something. She looked like one who could earn her keep. "Room and board, plus $2 a week." He said, "You'll cook 3 meals, keep the house, help with washing." No questions asked. None answered, she replied. "That suits you." "It suits me fine." He nodded once. Deal struck. "Amos will show you around." An older man appeared then, moving with the slow care of someone whose bones remembered every fall he'd ever taken. Amos Thorne's face was a map of years and sun, but his blue eyes still shone kind. "Welcome to Rattlesnake Ridge, miss," he said, tipping his hat. "Not much to look at, but she's honest land. Holds water in the deep wells. Grows enough grass for cattle. Been in the Blackwood family since before the war." Mai followed him toward the house, feeling Gideon's eyes on her back before he turned away toward the barn. The kitchen door stuck and needed Amos's shoulder to force it open. Inside, the air was heavy with neglect. Dust motes danced in the sunlight and the cold stove squatted in the corner like a forgotten beast. "Been just us menfolk for near on 3 years, Amos said, embarrassed. "Since Gideon's mama passed, we make do," he waved at the mess helplessly. Mai surveyed the chaos, the unwashed dishes, the greasy walls, the floor grey with dirt. She had seen worse. She had lived worse. "I'll need hot water and lye soap," she said. "Yes," Amos replied, relief in his voice. When he left, Mai rolled up her sleeves, but the motion froze her. The fabric slid back, showing faint yellow-green bruises shaped like fingers on her forearm. Old memories surged like ghosts. She yanked her sleeves down quick. Bartholomew was miles and a lifetime away. He couldn't find her here. Her hand went to the small, silk-wrapped charm at her throat. She never opened it. Never would. Some doors stayed closed for a reason. By the time Amos returned, she'd already begun clearing the clutter. They worked in easy silence, him hauling water, she scrubbing years of grime from surfaces that had forgotten what clean looked like. The rhythm of work calmed her. Work she understood. Work she could control. "You come from far?" Amos asked gently. "Far enough." He nodded. "Well, you're here now. That's what counts." As the sun climbed, the kitchen filled with the smell of soap and fresh air. Through the window, she saw Gideon mending a fence, his movements sure and careful. A man used to building barriers that kept more than cattle in and more than people out. By noon, she'd cook beans and cornbread. Simple food, but hot. When Gideon and Amos came in, they ate in silence, the kind that belonged to men who'd eaten too many cold meals alone. "This is fine," Gideon said finally. The word sounded awkward in his mouth, but honest. After the meal, the men went back to work and I kept cleaning. By afternoon, the house smelled of soap and coffee instead of dust and loneliness. Her small room was plain, a narrow bed, a washstand, but it had a door that locked. That meant everything. Later, she went to fetch water. The windmill groaned overhead as she drew up a bucket, cold and clear, tasting of iron. "Take some getting used to," Gideon said suddenly behind her. She started, nearly spilling the bucket. He stood there, hat in hand, keeping a respectful distance. "The water," he added. "Got iron in it. Good for cattle." "I've drunk worse," she said quietly. His gaze held hers a moment longer than necessary. What he found there seemed to trouble him. Or maybe reassure him. "Town's 5 miles east," he said. "Dry Creek. Amos goes every other Saturday. You can ride along if you need things. Or stay if you'd rather." "Then I'll stay," she said. He nodded once. "Your choice." The word "a choice" hit her like a prayer. She hadn't been given one in a long time. That night, Mai stood on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the endless hills. Coyotes called in the distance, and the air smelled of sage and cooling earth. Gideon appeared again, silent as the twilight, and set a knife and a pair of leather gloves on the rail. "For the work," he said. "Gloves will save your hands. Knives sharp enough for the kitchen, or other needs." He didn't mention the bruises he must have glimpsed. He didn't have to. "Thank you," she said softly. He touched his hat brim and walked back to the barn. Soon, a single lantern glowed in the loft window. A watch light. A quiet kind of guard. Inside, Mai unpacked her few things, 2 sets of clothes, a book of poetry in a language no one here could read, and the silk charm that held all her secrets. The walls still felt cold, but the smell of fresh cornbread lingered, and that was enough. Rattlesnake Ridge Ranch was rough, lonely land, but it asked for honesty, not explanations. And maybe, just maybe, that was something close to peace. The well bucket fought her grip, heavy with morning water. Mai braced her feet against the packed earth, hauling hand over hand. The rough rope burned against her palms, and her sleeve caught, tearing loose. The fabric slipped back, baring her arm. Yellow-green bruises marked her skin like ghostly fingerprints. Behind her, footsteps stopped. She turned and saw Gideon standing still, jaw tight, eyes locked on the marks. "Let me," he said quietly. "I can manage." I said, "Let me." The words came sharper than he meant. Not anger at her. She could see that. But anger at the past that had left its stain. Gideon stepped forward, took the rope, and hauled the bucket up in 3 quick pulls, muscles bunching with the effort. When it was done, he set it down hard, water sloshing over the rim. "That won't happen here," he said flatly. "Not on my land." Mai held his gaze. I know something passed between them in that look, an understanding of pain that didn't need words. Then Gideon turned and strode toward the barn, his shoulders rigid. She stood there a long time, the morning quiet except for the groan of the windmill and the steady beat of her own heart. Days passed into a rhythm. Chores, meals, repairs. The silence between them softened, turning into something companionable. Sometimes, when Amos wasn't around, Mai caught Gideon watching her. Not like a man sizing up a woman, but like someone studying light through storm clouds. Then, one afternoon, trouble came in a black buggy. A woman stepped down, tall and thin, her dark dress sharp as judgment. Her bonnet framed a face drawn tight as wire. "You must be the woman," she said before Mai could speak. "I'm the housekeeper," Mai replied. "I know who you are," the woman sniffed. "Prudence Finch. Church committee. I'm here to offer you respectable employment in town. There's a place for you at the hotel laundry. More suitable." "I have suitable work here," Mai said, her hands rolling pie-dough steady as ever. Prudence's voice dropped, full of scandal. "Living with 2 unmarried men is improper. Especially for your kind. People talk. People always do. Before Prudence could respond, the door opened. Gideon filled the frame, hat in hand, but his presence turned the small kitchen into his territory. "Mrs. Finch," he said evenly. "Miss My's employment is proper and permanent. Unless you've got ranch business, you'd best be on your way." Prudence flushed, lips tightening. "I'm only trying to help. The Lord sees all." "Then he sees Miss My working honest and being treated right," Gideon said. "Good day, When the buggy rolled away, the kitchen felt bigger, quieter. My pressed fork tines into the pie crust, her hand shaking slightly. "She means well," she said at last. "She means to judge what she don't understand," Gideon replied. "You're not going anywhere." "Not while I've got to say." The word sank deep, heavy with something that wasn't just protection. That night, the wind rattled the shutters. Gideon sat by the stove sharpening his knife while Amos smoked his pipe on the porch. "She's trouble, son," Amos said when Gideon stepped outside. "Not her fault, but folks will twist anything they don't understand." "They can talk all they want," Gideon answered. "I'm done bending my life to other people's talk." The next morning brought news worse than gossip. Amos came back from town grim-faced. "Corbin Drexel's back. Brought surveyors with him. Says he's claiming the east watershed for the railroad. They're damming up Willow Creek." Gideon's jaw hardened. "That's our water." "Not according to his papers," Amos said. "He's got the Henderson place under him already. Water meant life out here. Control the water, control the land." My felt the truth of it settle like a stone in her stomach. After breakfast, she said, "You have proof your father filed the rights." "Somewhere," Gideon muttered. "Filed them in Santa Fe years ago. Must be papers in his study." "Then we'll find them," she said simply. He looked at her, a long, searching look, then nodded. "All right." The study was a chaos of old ledgers and dust. Mai tied her hair back, rolled her sleeves, and began sorting through the mess. Gideon worked beside her, quiet but focused. Every so often their hands brushed, and neither of them pulled away. Hours passed before Gideon gave a low sound of triumph. He pulled a packet wrapped in oilcloth from beneath a stack of receipts. Inside were papers sealed and signed. Blackwood family water rights, properly filed and notarized. "Your father did it right," Mai said softly. "This will stand." Gideon exhaled slow, like a man letting go of years of fear. "Thank God." Before they could say more, hooves thundered outside. Amos burst in, breathless. "Anderson boys are here. Say Drexel's men dammed their creek and knocked their pa down when he tried to stop them." Gideon was already moving. "Amos, ride for the sheriff." "Mai, get the medicine kit." "I'm coming too," she said. "No. It could get ugly. Then you'll need someone who can patch you up." He hesitated, then nodded. "Stay back if there's shooting." They rode hard, the sun a cruel eye overhead. When they reached the Henderson place, they saw the dam, a crude wall of logs choking Willow Creek, and 2 armed men guarding it. "That's far enough, Blackwood," one of them called. "This here's railroad property." "Like hell it is," Gideon shouted back. "That's Henderson's water." The standoff hung on a knife's edge. Mai slipped off her horse and hurried toward the house where Mrs. Henderson knelt beside her husband, his shirt bloody. Mai cleaned and bandaged the wound, keeping one ear on Gideon's voice outside. When Sheriff Tate arrived with Amos and half the town, the odds shifted. The lawman held Drexel's papers to the light, then shook his head. "These are forgeries," he said flatly. "Tear down that dam." Drexel's men hesitated but obeyed, muttering threats as they rode off. "This isn't over," one warned. "No," Gideon said. "It ain't." On the ride home, the air between Gideon and Mai was charged with unspoken things. "You did good today," he said quietly. Keeping calm. "Helping." "I've had practice," she said. "When men get violent." He went silent, reins tight in his hands. "Is that why you wear that charm? The one you never take off?" Her hand went to her throat automatically. "Something like that. Whatever you're running from," he said, his voice low, "it won't find you here." "Not while I'm standing." The promise in his words stirred something deep in her, a mix of fear, gratitude, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. That night, the ranch slept under a wash of starlight. Gideon worked late in the barn, the steady hammering echoing across the yard like a heartbeat. Inside, Mai lay awake listening, knowing that for the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving. She was starting to live again. The coyotes came with the new moon, bold and hungry. Mai heard them first, low growls, the sound of hooves shifting nervously in the corral. She rose, pulled on Gideon's old shirt over her nightdress, and took the axe he kept by the door. Outside, the night air bit cold. Stars hung bright as frost, and the sheep bunched tight against the fence. She caught the sight of yellow eyes moving in the dark. Mai raised the axe high and brought it down hard on the chopping block. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound cracked through the stillness like gunfire. "That's right," she called into the dark. "Move along. Nothing for you here." Bootsteps came quick behind her. Gideon appeared, rifle in hand, taking position beside her without a word. His presence felt steady, unshakable. "Smart thinking," he said quietly. "They'll remember that sound." Together they stood until the eyes vanished into the hills. Only when silence settled again did she realize she was shaking, not from fear, but from the fierce protectiveness burning through her veins. "You did good," Gideon said. "Could have stayed inside, but you stood your ground." "They're my responsibility too," she said softly. "All of it is." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "You sound like my mother. She used to bang pots to scare off coyotes. Said, the land stays civilized because women make noise in the dark. Sounds like a wise woman." She was. She'd have liked you. The words caught her off guard, gentle and raw. "I'm glad," she said finally. He nodded once, then walked back toward the barn, his silhouette swallowed by moonlight. Mai stood alone for a moment longer, the weight of the axe heavy and reassuring in her hand. At dawn, she was feeding chickens when a rider appeared at the gate, a stranger dressed too fine for a drifter. He sat his horse like a man used to hunting. "Morning, he said with a polite tip of his hat. "Looking for Mr. Blackwood." "He's out with the herd," she lied easily, her hand resting near the knife at her belt. The man smiled, a thin, cold expression. "Then I'll wait." "Name's Flint." "Business matter?" Amos appeared, walking slow but steady. "Help you, stranger." "Just waiting on Mr. Blackwood," Flint said, dismounting. His eyes, pale and sharp, swept the yard, noting every detail, the fresh curtains, the tended garden, the signs of a woman's hand. Inside, Gideon watched from the window. "Bounty hunter," he said flatly. "Or Drexel's man. Either way, he's fishing." They stepped out together, playing it calm. Flint sipped coffee like a guest, but his questions cut sharp. "Fine place you have. Must take good help to keep it running. Hard to find trustworthy people these days." His gaze slid to Mai. "You seem familiar. Ever been to Texas?" Mai's heart thudded, but her voice stayed steady. "No, sir. I keep to myself." He smiled without warmth. "Funny. There's talk of a Chinese girl down there. Late 20s, hair black as ink. Her husband's looking for her. Bartholomew Kane. Offering a bounty. Says she attacked him, stole from him. Dangerous sort." Gideon's voice came calm and cold. "Miss Mai is under my protection. Her past is her own." "Of course," Flint said, setting down his cup. "But if you remember anything, there's gold in it for you." He mounted up and rode off slow, dust curling behind him like smoke. "He knows," Mai whispered. "He suspects," Gideon said. "But he's not certain." And his not getting you. She opened her mouth to argue, but the fire in his eyes stopped her. For once, she let someone else stand between her and danger. That night, she couldn't sleep. The silk charm felt heavy against her chest. Outside, Gideon worked late in the barn, the rhythmic clang of hammer on iron steady as her heart beat. Amos found her sitting by the well, staring at nothing. That charm, he said gently, seems to carry a lot of weight. Inside is a picture of my mother, I said. And my marriage certificate. Proof I belong to him. I thought if I destroyed it, I'd be free, but I couldn't. Like burning it would erase the truth of what I lived through. Amos nodded, whittling quietly. Papers don't make a marriage. Love does. And he never loved you, did he? No. He just owned me. Then he never had you at all, Amos said simply. You're free now. Just got to believe it. His words settled deep in her heart. That night, she slept with the charm in her hand, not as a chain, but as proof she'd survived. 2 days later, Corbin Drexel arrived in person. 3 men at his side, a lawyer with a case of papers and arrogance enough for all of them. Morning, Blackwood, Drexel called, smiling like a snake. I'm here on railroad business. Seems your claim to the eastern watershed is incomplete. It's filed and legal, Gideon said, standing tall. Drexel shrugged. Maybe so, maybe not. But unless you produce original documentation in 10 days, the railroad moves forward. He glanced at his eyes cold and mocking. You've been distracted lately. Hard to manage land proper when you've got company. Before Gideon could reply, Sheriff Tate rode up. You got 10 days, Blackwood, he said reluctantly. After that, it goes to court. When the dust settled, Gideon looked at He knows about the church records. That's where the duplicates are kept. An abandoned place up north. Then we ride at dawn, she said. He hesitated. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do, she answered. Because this is home now. Something in his face softened, and for a moment, all the walls between them seemed to fall. We'll fight for it then. Together. That night, she opened the silk charm. For the first time, she took out the old marriage paper, held it to the lamp flame, and watched it burn to ash. The past couldn't hurt her anymore. The next day, the storm came sudden and violent. Rain hit the earth like hammer blows, and the dry arroyo turned deadly fast. Gideon was out checking the north fence when realized what was coming, a flash flood roaring down the gulch. She ran into the storm, shouting his name, her clothes heavy with rain. She found him struggling with a broken post, water already rushing around his boots. Gideon, she screamed. Get up the ridge, now. He caught her hand, pulling her close just as the wall of water thundered past where they'd stood. They scrambled up the slope, soaked and breathless, the flood roaring below. When it passed, they stood in silence, hearts pounding. He brushed wet hair from her face, his voice rough. You saved my life. She shook her head. We saved each other. They found shelter in an old line shack, dry inside and stocked with wood. Gideon lit a fire while she wrung out her hair, shivering. Can't help thinking how close that was, he said softly. How close I came to losing what I never had the courage to claim. Mai looked up at him, her heart hammering. Gideon. He stepped closer, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, his hands lingering. The air between them turned electric. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice trembling. About my husband. What he did to me. You don't have to. I do. Because I need you to understand why trust is so hard for me. He treated me like property. For 3 years, I was nothing but his to break. Gideon's jaw clenched. I'd kill him if he stood here now. I know, she whispered. But I don't want that anymore. I just want to live without fear. And you make that feel possible. He cupped her face in his hands, gentle as sunrise. I'm no poet. But you brought this place back to life. You brought me back. Every morning, I listen for your footsteps. When I hear them, I know the day is worth it. She smiled through tears. I don't need pretty words. Their lips met, slow, uncertain, then sure. Rain hammered the roof, but inside, the storm turned to warmth. His hands, rough from work, were careful, reverent. When she trembled, he stopped, waiting for her choice. She nodded. Cowboy, she whispered, her voice unsteady, what happens after I undress? He smiled, his eyes soft. Then you'll know desire. The kind that's chosen, not taken. The kind that means you're free. The fire crackled as the storm raged on. Their bodies found each other slow, tender, equal. When morning came, they lay tangled together, the world washed clean outside. Back at the ranch, Amos's relief showed in his eyes, but he said nothing about the new warmth between them. Life went on, fences mended, gardens tended, laughter returning where silence used to live. Weeks later, after more battles won and old wounds faced, Gideon took Mai's hand under the wide New Mexico sky. I'm no man for fancy talk, he said. But I'd like to build the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me? She smiled, tears bright in her eyes. Yes. They wed beneath the windmill she'd first stood under, surrounded by the people they'd once feared to face. And when Gideon kissed her, it wasn't shy or cautious. It was full of promise. Rattlesnake Ridge Ranch stood strong again, not just from sweat and work, but from a love rebuilt out of brokenness. And when the wind sang through the hills that night, it carried laughter, not loneliness.